Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to come down, and so I'm based in the northern half of the state, and I'm pleased to say that it's not raining up there. Yes, as Caroline indicated, I've come down to talk to you about enterprise suitability mapping and using digital soil mapping techniques to do that. And before I start, I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues in the Sustainable Land Use and Information Management section who also have had a big part in this study. And it goes right from the manager all the way through to the technical officers. It is a team game, and every component of the work that's been undertaken has been a great value. And just bringing it together in this format is excellent. Also, I'd like to acknowledge our partners, which include the Sydney University, CSIRO, the Ag Policy branch of the department, and also your own doctors Lee Sparrow, Bill Cotching, Fiona Kerslake and Rowan Smith, who have assisted with the Wealth from Water DSM project. So, to begin with, DSM, Digital Soil Mapping it stands for, so I'll use DSM quite a bit. I might also use ESM, which is Enterprise Suitability. So just stop me at any stage and you can ask if you need some clarification. Now, in 2010, the government made a special allocation of money to support the rollout of irrigation enterprises in the state. It was seen to be an area that, with the irrigation expansion, it was under supported. They needed resource information, and Wealth from Water was one of those projects that input to that process. It helped sell water as well in the regions, so that was also seen to be a positive move by the government and why they should dish out the money there. Essentially, the project was sited in two areas, the Meander Valley, 45,000 hectares there, and the Midland Irrigation Area, which is a smaller area of 27,000 hectares around the Tunbridge and Woodbury and Oatlands area. And also I want to talk to you about our current and future activities in this area if time allows too, and I hope there will be time to do that. Okay, Wealth from Water. Part of this special allocation of money was set aside for us to develop a range of tools and information products to help particularly farmers and potentially investors in the areas that are receiving new irrigation water through the pipelines. The information products were essentially to help reduce the potential production, financial and environmental risks in those areas from the irrigation development. And of course the ultimate aim was to support the growth of high value crops and enterprises in well-suited particular areas. But why choose digital soil mapping? Why not go the traditional way of describing soils and mapping them? Well, the answer to that, and there's two camps involved here, there's the traditional method and there's the DSM, and I'm sure there is an answer in the middle. But essentially, the existing soils data and the traditional maps weren't at a scale or quality required, so we had to do something better than 1 to 50 thou. And DSM was seen to be a quick and available methodology. Enterprise suitability required soil property information rather than soil type information. So when I say soil property, I mean pH, EC, it could be depth to clay. So being able to look at an individual soil property has value, and you'll see that later on when we put the layers together. And also there was a demand for a quantitative surface rather than the traditional qualitative approaches. And by using those soil properties, we could also do 3D analysis and a multi-depth generation work with the data. And of course, as new information comes on board or a new survey is undertaken, we can easily incorporate new information into the digital soil mapping approach. So if someone does a study within the meander area that collects a lot more soil property information, we can feed that into the same model and it will run and we'll get a better result. So those are the advantages. I'd just like to highlight how the traditional method doesn't help us. Here we have a traditional soil map, and basically for this large green area, the pH of that large green area would be determined by the modal soil type, which would then be extrapolated to the whole of the polygon. Now, DSM allows us to predict pH measurements at different parts of the landscape within that, so it enables us to subdivide that polygon down into more detail. Again, you know, this was part of our study area. This red area here is a large complex alluvial plain mapped as one miscellaneous soils unit, which really wasn't much help to us. Again, our product will be able to map this area, breaking down the landscape according to the soil properties, according to all the other layers of evidence information behind it, which we call covariates. And I'm slowly just introducing you some of the terminology that I'll be using throughout the presentation. So a covariate is an evidence layer which may be used in our modelling system, which helps us to predict where things are. Now, I might disappoint a few people in the room who are statistical nuts. I'm not going to go into a lot of the formulae, but essentially this is one of two formulas that I have in the presentation, and really it's a guiding principle that digital soil mapping is set around this relationship that soil classes or attributes are a function of soil data, climate, organisms, which includes us, relief, parent material, the age of strata, and spatial aspects. So we're essentially stacking a whole lot of those covariate layers which equate to one or more, in fact more than one of those individual aspects of that formula. So within one model we can have just about all of those things jammed into the model. So it's very similar, and I'd like the traditionalists, if they are in the room, to try and think through that it's pretty similar to the way a traditional soil surveyor might go through their thought processes when mapping, because often we will begin with the Catena process and we will look at the soil types downslope from a position and understand what drives the soil formation or the type of soil at each part of the landscape. We do that in this methodology, but we harness the computer power, and some of our models take weeks to run, and we use that power in order to extrapolate. And so it's really what our brains have done in the past, but we're able to do it for greater areas and for more complex relationships. The big difference, I guess, is that we don't produce soil type maps. It's a predictive soil mapping process as well, so it fills in the gaps where we don't have data, but based upon relationships of real data and landscape. And some might be interested to know that it's not all that new. Some parts of it are, but others have been, this sort of processing has been used in the resource industries for quite some time in terms of predicting where ore bodies might be and the like. Okay, along the way we had to do some skilling up, and in terms of the actual digital soil mapping processes and formulating the relationships and a lot of the statistical stuff, we worked with the Sydney University Faculty of Agriculture and Environment through an arc linkage project. We also interacted and partnershiped with the CSIRO through the Australian Collaborative Land Evaluation Program. They provided radiometric mapping facility and MIR analysis for us before we actually bought our own machine and we were able to use that. And also did some more digital soil mapping training with us. So we have evolved through a process whereby we chose a pilot study area, which was the meander area, and that neatly tied in with the wealth from water study to test and develop the methodology to see if it would work in that setting. Okay, the three main components, I guess, in enterprise suitability mapping, and that's to incorporate crop rules, soil terrain and properties, and climate data together in a model. Now, the Wealth from Water project required us to look at 20 different enterprises in both of those areas, the meander and the Midlands area. And you can see the list of enterprises there in red. And we partnered with the TIA staff to create rules, crop rules for each and every one of those enterprises. That helped to categorise the values for each of the soil climate properties according to suitability. So really what it came down to is, say if it was strawberries, we wanted to know what requirements strawberries had that would then result in the best crop of strawberries you could get. And also right down to the other end of the scale, what is detrimental to growing strawberries. Once you know that, and you've got a solid crop rule, and these were done in consultation with industry groups, and quite a lot of work went into this, as you can imagine. So that was one component. The other was collection of additional soils information. As you saw, that the existing soil mapping was not appropriate, not as useful as we'd like it to be. So we undertook a soil sampling program, 930 field sites, recording a variety of soil profiles in areas that were determined by statistical clustering methods. So that was to break down the landscape so that we adequately sampled the landscape. We also conducted MIR analysis on all of the samples, and as you can imagine, 930 profiles up to 10 horizons deep times, you know, that's quite a lot of samples to go through an MIR, quite time consuming. So you do the maths, that's, yeah, we still survived. And we also did a data trawl of existing soil information. And I'll talk about this later on, but if you look for it, there's other data out there that you can input into this process. So we looked at existing land use information, geology, terrain models and derivatives, so things like slope maps, elevation models. Radiometrics were used to help determine different soil parent material. And also we generated layers of our soil. We produced layers of soil properties ourselves and things like wetness maps as well from DEMs. So that was the second component. The third is data relating to climate. And for the project we installed temperature sensing devices. We had 271 temperature sensors in these little cages out in the landscapes. Again, we subdivided the landscape according to statistical sampling. So we represented all of the different types of climate within the area. So we represented them well. We also put I think it was 6 weather stations out as well. And the idea was to give us enough information to be able to model out these parameters on the right. So these in turn became layers within the process. Now, how did we put all that together? And I guess I'll just touch on the temperature loggers a little bit more. As you can see, here is our meander field area. We do not have one Bureau Met site within it. So how do we determine temperatures or critical temperatures for those enterprises? And it became obvious we couldn't rely upon these Bureau sites which are outside the survey area. So we set out our 271 temperature loggers. In fact, that's not 271. We put some down in the Midlands area as well, so it's perhaps 190 something. So we set those going for 12 months, and this is pretty. I like this. It's pretty clever because it's acknowledging that we don't have all that information. So we modelled the climate for a 12-month period, and you might say, oh well, it could be we could be in a cold cycle or a warm cycle. How do you know? Well, what we've done is looked at, after the 12-month period, looked at the relationship between each site and these, what we call super sites, the Bureau sites, which have got up to 20 years history, some of them. And for the same 12-month period, we come up with a relationship between all of these sites and those super sites. And we're then able to, with that relationship, backwards project a history. Okay, once you've got a history of temperature, you can then use that history to work out the likelihood of frost or the likelihood of certain chill hour days. So it's pretty clever in a way because it generates the data you need, but it's based upon real relationships. So that's to give you some idea of the way we generate some data sets. So back to the rules. This is an example of the rules that Tia produced for onions, and as you can see, we've colour-coded it to help you relate this to the maps I'm about to show you. But you can see for the well-suited areas, they require all of those parameters to be well-suited. Okay? Likewise, if you've got any of these occurring, it's going to push the classification down. So essentially, they're your rules for the well-suited, they're the rules for your suitable areas, they're your rules for your marginally suitable areas. Okay? Blue through to brown. Okay, and it's based upon those requirements in the enterprise rules requires for each of the covariate layers that are listed all through here. For the well-suited, it goes through and interrogates all these layers and picks out the areas that meet those criteria. Okay, and you can imagine the stack of data, and these are 30 metre pixels. So those areas that I spoke to you about earlier, even 45,000 hectares, 30 metre pixels, that's a lot of processing that's required. And that information is put into a model and outspits the map. It's that easy. No, it's not. But essentially, what is this enterprise suitability model? Well, it's a DSM process. It's a digital soil mapping process. And what is that? It's really a decision tree. Okay? This is the enterprise suitability model for pyrethrum. So every single box that you see there is a decision. Now, I wouldn't like to make those number of decisions in a day, but our computer doesn't complain, works for weeks on end. So what I'm getting at here is that to do the same work ourselves, there's no way we'd be able to do it. So the model applies rules for each enterprise to the soil and climate services, and it results in then the enterprise suitability rating for each 30-metre pixel. Plus, it identifies what the limitations are for that pixel as well. So you'll see in a little while, when you do click on an area in a map, it will say what the rating is, but it'll also tell you how we arrived at that rating, so you can actually interrogate what layers are causing it to be knocked down to the moderately suited. You'll see that shortly. Again, just to recap, well suited in blue, no significant limitations to sustained application of a given use. That's our definition for well suited. Ranging down to has qualities that appear to preclude sustained use, so unsuited. And these are the end products, really. And they can be used at a variety of scales. Even from a regional approach, you can see immediately that the brown areas are the areas, and this one's for pyrethrum, that are unlikely, wouldn't even contemplate starting that enterprise in that area. And straight away you'll see your hotspots, the greens and the blues, as the areas for perhaps worth looking at if you're an investor. Or if you own the neighbouring farm and you're looking to spread your risk, you might consider looking at buying the neighbouring farm if it comes up, if you want to grow pyrethrum too. So these were generated, as I said, just to recap, with 930 odd soil cores, 270 loggers, and we've placed them where everyone can get at them as well. And this is something I was talking to Marcus earlier on. There's no use generating good information if you hide it away somewhere. So we've made it accessible. So all of these enterprise suitability maps can be found on the list, which if you haven't been using the list, I would say this is Aladdin's cave in terms of spatial data. Go and check it out. Also on our website we've got links, and this is where the technology hopefully won't fail me. So within our departmental website we've got, because agricultural policy helped us with this, they wanted to host our information. It's in investing in irrigation, and we get a little section all to ourselves. Tells you a little about what we do, but it means that you can click on any of these and it will take you straight into an area where you can not only check out what the crop rules are. So for blueberries, let's have a look at what the crop rules are. Okay, so you know what's being used to generate the well-suited down through to the unsuited. You can also look at the fact sheets, and this is all done by TR, so I'm spruiking your work as well. So for an investor, they want to know what is this about blueberries, and can I grow them in Tassie, and what do I need, and how much area do I need, and what is the climatic requirement. So that's all there as well. But we have, for the meander area and the Midlands, so meander on the left, Midlands on the right, we've got a PDF of the map. So if you just want a quick look at it, you can look at a static PDF, or in this instance you can link through to the list. Okay, it'll take you right there. Now if you are a list user, you might have noticed that the format's changed for the list. These quick links are actually going to take you to the old format, but that's going to change, so bear with me. If you want to go to the list and use the new list, Loading. Just my luck if they're doing their backups or some kind of maintenance. That's working, that's good. Now, simply add your layers in. And I'm showing you this because I'm hoping that some of the information that we've put on here might be useful with what you do. I just simply put in soils here, and it will come up with a whole heap of layers that you might, and if you go into you just click on it, and wealth from water should bring up farming. Beg your pardon. Here we are. These are the enterprise suitability maps themselves, but also, so if you want, you just can click on cherries, add it to your list. And what I want to show you as well is that we've put all the soil sample sites that we did, those 930 sites, we've put them on here as well. So what you need to do is zoom in, because it won't show you them until you zoom in. They're all the, you see those blue circles, they are all our sites. Let's turn this on. Why isn't cherries working for us? It's catching up, I think. So there we are. Let's just drag it back. Okay, so for every site that we've got there, you can click on it. It will tell you the grid reference, and then if you click on the view link, it'll come up with all of our data. So you can go in there and say that I did a survey and copy the information. No, you wouldn't do that, would you? Anyway, it's really a really good reference. I've used it quite a bit. If you want to actually look at the enterprise suitability map, which is what we're talking about today, this catch up, we'll turn him off to speed things up. I can zoom in to any of these areas and it will give me, you know, this is the enterprise suitability rating of suitable, and it goes through all the parameters that have been used within the assessment, and if I scroll down here it will tell you the most limiting parameters there is EC, slope and growing degree days. Those are the things that are holding that area back. Now the power in knowing that is that some of these limitations are what we call soft limitations, like drainage. You can put a drainage system in to raise the level potentially of that area that you're looking at. So from an investor's point of view, they will go, well, I could probably remove that limitation, and it's not on here, but if I picked a site that was limited by drainage, you could actually apply that thought process. Okay, that was really how you get at the data. It's easy, it's accessible. Go for it if you want to have a go. Alright, and that was my backup plan in case the technology didn't work. Now, byproduct from this, and we didn't really think about this, it wasn't an output of the process, but if you combine all of those suitability ratings for all of those enterprises and stack them up in a great big sandwich and combined them, you could apply the ratings again. So all of that brown area, it's got some restriction or a limitation which makes it less versatile than all of the other colours, going up to our areas in blue. So from a regional investment point of view, you could say, well, let's cut to the chase. Where am I going to, without doing a lot of work, where are the best areas in these regions? And this helps to do that. Again, that's the Oatlands and Tunbridge area. So all the brown areas are the areas which are less versatile than the yellow, green and blue areas. Oop, hang on, I'm going to go back one. Okay, present activities. We're applying the same process that we did to the smaller areas to the whole of the state now. The big difference is that we're actually converting, well, we're going from 30 metre pixel size to an 80 metre resolution. We've also been asked by the Flinders Island Council to do enterprise suitability mapping there, because their population is shrinking and they want to attract people who are going to produce stuff to the island. So maybe, you know, high value herb and seed production people who don't just retire there but they're actually producing something. So that was an interesting from left field approach that we've had. That still is to happen before Christmas, and it's a 10,000 hectare area. So again, from one scale, the whole state, down to 30 metre resolution again. Now the statewide 80 metre resolution mapping has been to answer questions that the Terrestrial Ecosystem Research Network want answering. They want data for their website and they've contracted us to do that. Again, they wanted 80 metre resolution and they said, right, you've got to produce enterprise suitability stuff. And we say, okay, well, we can provide that, and look, we've got all the crop rules already for the wealth from water area. We might need to tweak those for the different regions around Australia, around the state though. And they want a frost risk map and they want chill hour map. Okay, yeah, we've got the formula for it. We just need the data. So we've had to do a data trawl to get together information which will answer to give them 12 soil properties. So that's all they want, and there they are there: organic carbon, drainage, pH, EC, total P, total N, ECSE, stone percentage, clay percentage, sand percentage and silt. And at the same time we're getting asked to produce information for the global soil map project, which is backed by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they want 9 key soil attributes, but they're quite happy to take 90 metre resolution at 6 fixed depths. So we can answer and provide outputs to both these organisations, and so we're tying it into the same statewide model. And version 1, because what I alluded to earlier, is that you can, as more information comes on board, increase the power of the process. Well, we're going to do a run through with just the information that we've got on hand at the moment through our data trawl. So we've scraped together all our 4,000 sites out of our database from various studies that have been done in the past, from old CSIRO descriptions that were done in the 40s. We've got Forestry Tasmania sites. They've allowed us to be custodian of their data. I'm talking to organisations like this one to try and collect data that have been done in studies in the past. So everyone's PhD and master's thesis that have got data with grid reference attached to them, we'd be very, very pleased to talk to you about that. But that'll happen in version 2. At the moment we're going to run version 1, and our covariates include all of these, all sorts of terrain derivatives, wetness indexes, northness indexes, eastness indexes. It's a hard one to say, eastness indexes. Right down to other remotely sensed stuff, like perpetual greenness index, which is to indicate, we use that to predict where we have drainage problems, because you've always got green grass pretty well where you've got moisture. In summer it stands out. We acknowledge that there's going to be some gaps But by running this process, we also highlight where we do have gaps and perhaps where we need to do some more work. We plan to fill some of those gaps up by using the statewide land systems information and pulling that to pieces, breaking up those areas that are indicated by the land systems and into their landscape units. I'm not a statistician, but that'll happen before Christmas using these statistical software units or processes. We've currently got both our statisticians and DSM scientists in France at the moment. They're being acknowledged for this work, and they've got papers to present in France. So not only are we getting recognition within our state organisation, but this work is closely, well, we're leading the national race, if you like, but also it's being recognised globally that this information and this process could have benefit. Now for version 2, we want to use some additional legacy information, so data that we know it's got to be out there. You've collected data that we haven't got hold of yet. I've been finding work that's been done by Parks and Wildlife on soils in the southwest. The southwest is a big hole for us. Not many people get out there to do sampling out there. I would love to go out there, but I've luckily found a researcher who his project was to sample soil on every single mountain in the southwest. And there's data to go with it, and there's a grid reference to go with it, and it's gold. So we'll put that information in, and more information is coming out of the woodwork, but it's a big job to compile all that information. So that's going to go in version 2. So what does it mean for Tassie? We'll get an 80-metre digital soil map, so something similar to what we did for Wealth from Water. And we'll be able to produce those layers that you saw for all those enterprises for the whole of the state. We'll also we have put out a network of temperature sensors as well just recently. I'll show you the scatter map of those. And we're able to answer the global soil map question at a better resolution that they asked for. So it's a bit of a win. So these are first of all, the background map. This gives you an indication of how we subdivide the state into 20 different climatic zones, and we have, through our siting of these green temperature logger sites, representatively sampled each of those climatic areas. Now, we acknowledge there's a big gap in here, but we have these landscapes are represented elsewhere, so we've got other locations where those have been sampled. I'll keep going. What other uses can we use for the statewide climate work? There's been discussions about perhaps improving upon the resolution of the climate futures data that's been published. And, you know, do we want to know what crops we might be able to produce into the future as our climate warms or changes? So, as you can see here, the resolution is the best that could be done at the time, but potentially we can go to that resolution. The other thing is that we can use this climate information. The Bureau of Met are really interested. At the moment, this is the frost map that they have, but we at the moment can give them that. So you can see the resolution difference straight away. There's a couple of layers that we've produced for the statewide, which I thought I'd share with you. This is our drainage index map. So it's based upon these environmental predictors, radiometrics, DEMs or terrain analysis products, climate stuff, Close distance to the coast, and this persistent greenness index that I was explaining to you. So you get a good idea of the blue areas are the very poorly drained or moist areas, wet areas, through to the rapidly draining locations. Zoom in, you can see that it actually works. These are high parallel dune systems on the northeast coast. Overlay the data and you'll see the red areas extending out with them because they're elevated, they're very well drained, as opposed to the alluvial plains and systems at the end of these river systems. So these are all alluvial plains in along through here, as opposed to the hill systems. So that would be one covariate, if you like, inside the DSM model, but it has a use of its own itself. This is one way of, this is a way that we've modelled clay percentage based upon known information and then extrapolating that known information out to similar landscapes and climatic areas. And you can see there's some statistics involved. I'm not going to go into that other than to say that it results in us being able to have an upper prediction limit which you wouldn't use. It's pushing the envelope, and you've got back the other way our lower prediction limit. So we take the middle road, or the one that fits best with our R-squareds, and we run with that one. So this is clay percentage for each depth down the profile, and just tried to give you a meaningful use for that data. Here we've combined the modelled clay percentage with extrapolated EC 1 to 5 and using the pedotransfer function to create ECSE, which is saturated extract. It's more of an indication of what the plant feels for salinity. We've been able to produce a map of Tassie and look at the different salt storage for each depth. So I'll let this run. So there's hardly much in the top of the profile, but as we move through the profile you'll see new areas appearing on the map. This area starts to expand, and some more in here for the next depth, as you can see. So this is taking a slice down through the profile. That's why we collect soil property information and not produce soil maps, and that's the power that you're able to slice through the soil and answer these sorts of questions. So other applications, there's lots. You can apply it to any data, any spatial data. It's been one of the big issues at the moment is food security and agricultural potential in the developing world. There's, as determined by the Turn faculty, carbon mapping is another one. So there's potential for these areas of research and use. But also it can help us identify where we need more work to be done as well. And as I mentioned before, it's a dynamic product. We can actually produce more if we find new layers that have come. And with certainly remotely sensed data, we've just touched the top of the iceberg. I think as technology improves, we'll be getting new layers of remotely sensed data. Okay, that's the end of the presentation, but if you are a soil researcher or you are collecting information, this is my little plug here. If you've got that little bit of gold in your filing cabinet or on your hard drive, I'd be happy to hear from you. And don't feel bashful or ashamed about the format that you might have it in. I've seen it all, from scribbles in notebooks. I'm on the scrounge for anything you can offer, but it has to have a good reference, and if it's got any laboratory analysis, I'd like to know which laboratory it's come from. That's that's it. So they're my contacts, and we'll make sure that you are referenced and your privacy is guaranteed. Okay, well that's that. Anyone like to ask any questions? Or Caroline, do you want to take the floor?
I was going to say thanks, Rob, for coming all the way from the north. An extra effort for you for this fascinating and seminar, and it obviously represents a huge amount of work by a large team of people. And I'm sure we're going to have some questions.
I know you had the honours seminars and you've probably used up all your questions there, but gone. No,
the 80-metre statewide mapping, how many new holes are you planning to drill to calibrate your soil attributes?
Version 1, 0. Alright? Because we want to see what we can produce, and then we can work out with DSM, it can give us a measure of uncertainty, and where the areas of high uncertainty are, that will guide us to put more information, more holes in, or more soil information into those areas. Now, in the version 2, we're hoping to put a lot more what we call legacy data, or old data that's been collected elsewhere, or that, we will add that in first, and then still see where we've got uncertainties that are unacceptable. And hopefully that's where we will rely upon the terrestrial ecosystem network to fund some of that.
Does that mean for version 1 that your mapping is dependent upon the correlations that you established in Meander?
No, there'll be new correlations formed for the state. The ones that were formed in Meander were constrained by the area, the survey area. Yep.
Correlates existing land crops already in the ground with data that you generated?
Yes, in fact, that was an important way that we used to check the information. For poppies, particularly in the Midlands, and if you've been on Google Earth, you've seen all the centre pivot circles. We were very pleased to see a very strong correlation with the centre pivot circles and the enterprises that indicated cropping uses. All right, so I think the versatility maps show that as well. So you could almost say that if you combined the cleared agricultural land with the versatility map and took the difference, you could then see the areas of potential for that land use.
With the specific layers correlated pretty well, especially well, but
Sorry, just to wind back, we didn't specifically try to predict where cropping or agriculture was. We predicted where particular enterprises. So there's a slight difference, and I don't know. Does that help?
Yep.
Some of the variables are going to be very more variable.
Variable.
Especially for soil properties. So is there any intention to maintain that data or to resample it? How can I explain that?
Yes, we store all the data that's been used. We've got that on hand. The variability, we go some way to explaining that variability through the process, and that's where our measure of uncertainty comes in, and there's a whole swag of statistical stuff hidden behind this, and I've not got into that today, and I'm not the best person to explain it either. But where you have very variable areas, the mapping will actually tell you that it is variable, and in terms of you'll get a lower confidence value in your R squared and your relationships. So that's indicated. And as we get more information, the certainties will increase because you're basing it on a lot more real data.
You might as well at temporal variability, so you collect your samples on
Winter and summer and yep. Most of those are not impacted too much with that we're using here. But it's a good point.
It would be fantastic to have that sort of tool to look at, risk to waterways or from nutrient runoffs or groundwater.
Yep.
To link that.
You're already, which is good. I'm pleased. It was worth coming down the highway just to hear you say that, because you're already thinking about uses for this, and there's multiple uses. And I believe, Marcus, you mentioned to me that you're looking for a student to do some project relating to this. So if you're interested at all, do you want to have a spruik about that?
Yeah, thanks for that plug. I was hoping I'd get a chance. This year, for the first time ever, we've got a small amount of funding available for a non-student who is interested in digital soil mapping or the application of this type of data and process. The student could be based here or up in Melbourne, or spend time in the field with people like Rob, so they can be co-hosted by DPIPWE. So just spread the word. It's a new opportunity that hasn't existed before. We haven't got a lot of money, but we've got a little bit of money to support the operation of the student.
Thanks.
Any more questions? Yep.
Yeah, the cross maps or salt maps and things are pretty handy. Are they available from the DPI website you were going to before, or will be?
At the moment, the enterprise suitability maps is all that's up there at the moment.
Right.
We haven't marketed those particular covariate layers yet, but I guess I alluded to that with this interest by the Bureau for our frost maps, and certainly if anyone makes those sorts of inquiries, we'll make them available. It's something that we are looking to do. We've got to revamp a number of our websites, and we're hoping that we can get these up as I'd actually prefer to see them on the list so that people can use them with all those other great background data layers and cadastral layers and other maps as well. So watch this space, I guess. Yeah, good question.
Okay, there's one more question.
Can you get any information off farmers in there? Like if they've got soil tests on file, or is it not applicable because they haven't got a GPS point?
That is the problem is
there's a big pile of data.
there's a huge amount of data. There is really a huge amount of data. The logistics of capturing it, and I've been wondering whether we set up a community science project whereby people who they know on Google Earth where the sample came from, and they could get their grid reference and enter it into a database and then type in the information and have this being collected over time. We would have a fantastic resource, but that's as close as I've got to being able to realise it. But you're dead right that there's so much information out there. I work in an organisation which used to run a soil laboratory in Launceston for nearly 30 years. And all the pH and EC tests and all the nutrient analysis, it was in the days before good backups and good computing. We don't have that at all. It's gone. So which is why it's important to do this data trawl now and to say, well, before people die and forget where the filing cabinets are that they stored their life's work in, have got to, we want to get hold of that data. So if you think you know of a data set that's lurking around, just let us know and we'll get it into production.
All right, just for one last exercise, could you scroll back to that salinity map for us, Rob? Yep. And could you just
which
What ways are around the where the Midlands scheme's going to be?
Oh, okay. Okay.
I think we might have to conclude on that point.
Before I do though, I'll put that in context, and what I understand Marcus is alluding to is what's the sustainability of having an irrigation system in the Midlands. And I would put forward that if you know that there's a hazard there, you can better manage it. So this goes to 2 metres and we'll run it. So this is the area of the Midlands development. But there's one up here as well, and there's one down here, and yeah, there's quite a few going on. Would have been quite a useful exercise. So this is the Fingal Valley, so it's sort of in around here. Yeah.
I think it's down a little.
Right, that's down to 2 metres. Now, just on that though, I'd like to ask a question back to Marcus. Do you think that map's going to stop the irrigation process?
No, and nor should it.
Right, good. Okay, so it gives us something to work with, that we know that there's a hazard there. How do we stop this salinity? And maybe we need to do some more work in that area, additional to the areas that we've done some work in. So cover the whole of the area and actually quantify some of this stuff that's in the model. And that then be recycled back into the model to improve the model too. So
It's not just that, Rob. We need active research on the management of these limitations on these soils.
yep,
Within our production
you're quite right.
systems as well.
You're quite right. But if we can tell primary producers that there is likely to be an issue with soil salinity at these depths and run this through for them, seeing is believing. Information is to some degree power. They can say, oh, well, gee, what can we do to prevent it from getting up into the... Because it's not all that bad in the top part of the profile, which is where they're operating. And the saving grace, and we've got to keep this in perspective, and I'm not spruiking agriculture and irrigation, but I'm just trying to justify it, that the difference between Tasmania and some of the older irrigation systems that have been criticised and have had problems relating to them is that the quality of the water being used here is very, very good. Now, that also adds problems if you're dealing with sodic soils, but it's not going to result in... be careful what I say. It's unlikely to result in the same sorts of problems that they had in the Murray-Darling, because of the fact that they're using good quality water here.
And lower ET here as well.
Yeah. So yeah, I take the point that you might question why have an irrigation system there, but if you know that this is down here and starts to become a problem around the 60 centimetres, you do management that you don't go playing around with water tables down here. You deficit irrigate. You make sure you know how much water and what you. A lot of farms now are running moisture equipment within their pivots, so they know when it's getting wet down at that level. All right. Anyone else?
Oh yeah. Anyone else have a question? Okay. Well, Rob,
Right.
we'd like to thank you very much for a very interesting talk.